The flashing blue and red lights of the cruiser washed over a lonely stretch of highway in rural Alabama. Officer Grant Baxter leaned his heavy frame against the door of an old Ford F-150, his face a mask of bored authority. He peered inside at the driver. License and registration. The old man behind the wheel, Silas Cromwell, moved with a calm that was deliberate, not slow. Deep lines were etched into his face, but his eyes, clear and steady, held no fear, only patience. "Yes, sir," he replied, his voice a low gravel. From the passenger side, Officer Lou Rigsby shifted his weight, his hand hovering near his pistol. He was younger than Baxter and twice as eager. "You know why we stopped you tonight?" Silas was already retrieving his papers from the sun visor. "Busted taillight. I've got the part at home. Just haven't had the time." Baxter snatched the documents, scanning them under the beam of his flashlight. Silas Cromwell. Clean record, no priors. So why did this guy get under his skin? It was the stillness. The way the old man just stared straight ahead, as if this were a minor inconvenience, not a challenge. "That an old army jacket?" Rigsby asked, eyeing the faded patches on Silas's shoulder. Silas gave a single, slow nod. "Served a long time ago." "What branch?" Baxter pressed, his tone sharp. "What unit?" "Army," Silas said calmly. "Special Operations, Southeast Asia." Baxter's lips tightened into a smirk. "Sure you were, old-timer. Special Operations, huh? Sounds convenient." He shoved the documents at Rigsby and nodded towards the glove box. "Go ahead and pop that open for us, sir." Silas didn't move for a second. "Are you looking for something specific?" "It's a routine check," Baxter lied. Silas's gaze flickered to him, then back to the road. "There's a pistol in there," he said, his voice unchanging. "A military-issued sidearm. It's registered." A jolt of triumph shot through Baxter. "And you failed to declare that to us. You didn't ask." That was it. The calm, precise answer pushed Baxter over the edge. He yanked the truck door open. "Out! Hands where I can see them. Get out of the truck now." Silas stepped out, his movements fluid, his hands visible. There was a quiet control in the way he moved that irritated Baxter even more. "The weapon is legal," Silas stated. "I've had it since 1973. It isn't loaded." But they weren't listening anymore. Rigsby leaned in, pulling out the heavy steel-frame pistol. "You got a permit for this?" he barked. "Yes," Silas replied, his eyes locked on Baxter. "Back pocket." Baxter smirked, enjoying the moment. "Is that so?" He grabbed Silas by the shoulder and roughly spun him around, shoving him against the side of the cold Ford truck. "Hands on the hood, now!" Silas complied without a word, the worn fabric of his jacket scraping against the dusty metal. Rigsby fumbled in Silas's back pocket and pulled out an old leather wallet. He flipped it open and found the permit. He scanned it. His face fell slightly. Grant," Rigsby hesitated. "It's valid. State and federal, it's all here." Baxter snatched the permit, glancing at it with contempt before shoving it back at his partner. "I don't care if it's signed by the president. Something about this stinks." He pulled out his handcuffs. "You're taking a ride." The cuffs clicked shut, cold and tight around Silas's wrists. As they walked him toward the cruiser, the red and blue lights painting his calm face, Silas spoke quietly, more to himself than to them. "You know, I once led a mission in '85. Saved over a dozen civilians. Never even made the papers." Baxter let out a cruel laugh. "Yeah? And I used to be a quarterback for the NFL." "Shut up and get in the car, old man." He pushed Silas into the back of the cruiser, the door slamming shut with a heavy, final thud. They processed him at the station in rural Alabama, the air thick with the smell of stale coffee and cheap disinfectant. Officer Baxter typed up the report with a smug satisfaction, while Rigsby watched the old man in the holding cell. "Hasn't moved an inch," Rigsby muttered, taking a sip from his styrofoam cup. "Just sits there. Kinda creepy." "He's a nobody, Lou," Baxter said without looking up from his screen. "An old man with a tall tale and a pistol he shouldn't have. We did our job." Inside the cell, Silas Cromwell sat on the cold steel bench. He wasn't staring at the floor. He was watching the large clock on the wall, his gaze steady. He wasn't counting with anxiety. He was counting with purpose. Deputy Anya Sharma approached from the front desk, a frown on her face. "You two ran a full ID on him, right? Before you put him in a cell?" "We're getting to it." Baxter waved her off. "You're supposed to do that first, Grant," she pressed. "What if he has a condition? What if his story checks out?" "He said he was special ops," Rigsby chuckled. "Claimed he has clearance. If he's telling the truth, we'll find out." But the truth was already starting to move. The moment Baxter had hit enter on Silas Cromwell's name, A silent alarm had been tripped in a server farm hundreds of miles away, buried deep in a secure federal facility. A single encrypted packet of data was now silently racing towards them. Think he's one of those tinfoil hat vets? Rigsby smirked. The kind who says they train dolphins to hunt for submarines? You'd be surprised what the military used to get up to, Sharma mumbled, turning back to her desk. From inside the cell, Silas's voice cut through the room, soft but firm. You boys ever been in a firefight? They all looked up. Baxter approached the reinforced glass. What was that? I asked, Silas repeated, his eyes locking onto Baxter's. If you've ever had to choose who lives and who dies, with a sniper's crosshairs on a mother holding her child, Baxter let out a short, harsh laugh. Oh, here we go. I remember her eyes, Silas continued, his voice dropping lower, pulling all the air from the room. She didn't speak a word of English, but I knew what she was begging for. And I took the shot, not proud of it, but I did my duty. Silence. Even Rigsby stopped smiling. Believe me or don't, Silas added, but if you think I'm just an old man with a story, you're not paying attention. Baxter stared, then turned away with a scoff. He's messing with us. Don't fall for it. But as he turned back to his computer, a sharp icon blinked onto the screen. It wasn't the usual blue or yellow flag for a local warrant. It was a single stark red icon, pulsating next to the name Cromwell Silas. Before Baxter could even point it out to Rigsby, the phone on the back wall rang. It was line 3, the direct, outside line that never ever rang. Sharma looked up. Baxter hesitated, then picked it up. Sheriff's office. The voice on the other end was cold steel. You have Silas Cromwell in custody. It wasn't a question. Yeah, who is this? This is Agent Kincaid. We are 10 minutes out. Do not move him. Do not question him. And under no circumstances are you to speak to him again. Is that understood? Baxter's mouth went dry. Wait, what is this about? The line went dead. Grant? Sharma asked, standing up slowly. What did he say? Before he could answer, powerful headlights swept through the station's front windows, blinding them. 3 black, unmarked SUVs glided to a silent stop outside. The doors opened in unison and men in dark suits emerged, moving with a fluid, unnerving efficiency. The station door swung open. Agent Kincaid stepped inside, flanked by his team. He was tall, sharp, and his presence immediately sucked all the authority out of Baxter and Rigsby. They were no longer cops in their station. They were trespassers in his. Kincaid's eyes scanned the room and locked onto the holding cell. He strode past Baxter without a second glance. We'll take it from here. As 2 of his agents, including one named Holloway, plugged secure laptops into the workstations, Kincaid spoke without looking back. I want all footage, all paperwork, and a log of every word spoken to him since the moment of his arrest. Immediately. Hey, hang on, Baxter stammered, finding his voice. You can't just walk in here and... Kincaid stopped and turned his head slightly. His voice was quiet, but it hit Baxter like a physical blow. Officer, you are currently detaining a protected federal asset. That man is not to be questioned or processed without direct clearance from the Pentagon. If you have a problem with my methods, I invite you to call them. Baxter froze. Inside the cell, Silas Cromwell looked up. A faint smile touched his lips, not of triumph, but of weary resignation. Kincaid walked to the cell, tapped a code into the electronic lock, and swung the door open himself. Sergeant Cromwell. Silas stood, his joints cracking softly. Took you long enough, Kincaid. Traffic was a mess, Kincaid replied. He glanced at the 2 stunned local cops. They treat you like a suspect? I've had worse, Silas said, his eyes on Baxter. At least they didn't ask me what unit I served in 3 times. Look, we didn't know who he was, Rigsby blurted out, his voice shaking. The weapon wasn't declared. We had to. You didn't know because you didn't listen. Agent Holloway cut in coldly from his workstation, never taking his eyes off the screen. And for that, you've both been flagged for mishandling a Class A sensitive individual. Congratulations. The room was dead quiet, the word congratulations hanging in the air like a death sentence. Agent Kincaid turned his attention from the 2 frozen officers to Deputy Sharma, who stood by her desk. Deputy, Kincaid's voice softened slightly. Were you involved in the arrest? No, sir, she answered quickly. I was on front desk duty. You're clear, he said with a nod. Then his gaze hardened as he looked back at Baxter and Rigsby. The rest of you, don't move. Every word you've said, every action you've taken since you pulled Sergeant Cromwell over is now part of a federal investigation. If your body cam footage shows any mistreatment, you will be hearing from our legal branch." From his workstation, Agent Holloway's voice cut in, cold and monotone, as he read from his screen. "Here's what you missed. Cromwell Silas, Master Sergeant, retired, attached to a classified JSOS unit throughout the 80s and 90s, stationed in places the news has never heard of, recipient of the Medal of Valor and a Pentagon citation for preservation of civilian life." Baxter blinked, his mind struggling to catch up. "But if he's a hero, why is he flagged in your system?" Kincaid walked slowly toward him. "Because Sergeant Cromwell isn't just a veteran. He is part of a standing protection program for operatives whose past actions carry severe international consequences." He gestured toward the evidence bag with Silas's pistol. "That sidearm you seized? It's the primary evidence in a case that stopped an entire embassy from being overrun in 1989. There are certain people who would pay millions to get their hands on him or that weapon." Rigsby's face went pale. "Wait, you mean someone might be tracking him?" "Not might," Holloway said without looking up. "Is." Baxter took a step back as if the floor had become electrified. "We had no idea." "No," Kincaid replied, his voice dangerously low. "You didn't. And that's the problem." In the background, another agent finished downloading the dash cam and body cam files, every smirk and insult now preserved on a secure federal drive. Silas watched them, not with anger, but with a profound weariness. He looked like a man who had carried too many secrets for too long and had stopped expecting to be understood. "Do you want to press charges for the arrest, Sergeant?" Kincaid asked him. Silas shook his head. "Not worth the paperwork, but I would like my sidearm back." Holloway walked over and handed him the pistol in a sealed case. "You're cleared." Silas took it, then turned to Baxter. "You ever get a gut feeling about someone?" he asked quietly, "and then choose to ignore it for an easier, uglier thought?" Baxter couldn't find a single word to say. "Maybe next time," Silas added. "You'll ask before you assume." As they prepared to leave, Deputy Sharma approached them. "Sir," she said to Silas, holding something in her palm, "I think these are yours. They fell under the desk. They were his dog tags." Silas took them, the worn metal cool against his skin, the names and numbers faded from a lifetime of use. "They called us ghosts," Silas said softly, looking at the tags but speaking to the officers. "We went where others wouldn't." He looked up, his eyes finding Baxter's. "That story I told you about Thailand in '85? We were sent in to pull hostages from a schoolhouse. 4 Americans, aid workers, a 6-year-old boy. You never heard about it because we were never there. The price for getting them out," he said, his voice going quiet, "was 4 of my men, the best men I ever knew. So when I hear someone laugh about war like they've seen it in a movie, it makes me wish they could carry just one day of the real thing. Just one." The station felt like a tomb. "But why was he flagged so fast tonight?" Sharma asked Kincaid. Holloway answered for him, holding up a thin folder. 3 weeks ago, Sergeant Cromwell's name appeared on a leaked list from an old CIA archive. Someone is actively hunting down the names on that list. 3 of them are already missing." Silas gave a short, bitter laugh. "So you see why I don't appreciate being handled like a common criminal." "Look, man, I'm sorry," Rigsby stammered. "I didn't know." Silas looked him straight in the eye. "No, you didn't," he said. "But you should have treated me like a man, not a problem you needed to solve." Kincaid stepped forward. "We've been trying to get men like Sergeant Cromwell off the grid before the wrong people find them. Tonight, you put a spotlight on him. You increased the risk." The weight of his failure finally crushed Officer Baxter. I'll write a full statement," he stammered. Silas Cromwell met his gaze. "Write it for yourself," he said. "Not for me. We need to move," Agent Kincaid said sharply. "Now." Desperate for any justification, Baxter mumbled, "We were just doing our job." Kincaid shot him a look of pure ice. "You were making a judgment." He took a step closer. "You want to know why we never lost track of him? Because the last time Sergeant Cromwell was activated, it was for a mission that was supposed to happen on American soil. If that had gone live, you'd be speaking his name with a hell of a lot more respect." "We have copies of everything," Agent Holloway announced from his workstation. "Dash cam, body cam, audio. It's all logged." Are we being investigated?" Rigsby asked, his voice cracking. "You're being reviewed for disciplinary action," Holloway stated flatly. "Your report better match our recording of every word you said tonight." "We didn't use excessive force," Baxter insisted. Silas finally stepped forward. "You think I care about that?" he asked, his voice cutting through their excuses. "I've had snipers in tree lines. You think your handcuffs shake me?" He looked at the 2 officers, their authority now completely gone. "I care about respect, The kind you give without being asked. He glanced at the sealed case containing his pistol. You asked why I still carry this? Because the world is full of people who remember men like me for all the wrong reasons. As they turned to leave, Holloway spoke again, his voice carrying across the silent room. A formal request for disciplinary review is being sent to the State Department. You arrested a protected federal asset, mocked his service, and ignored protocol. Rigsby sank into a chair, his shoulders slumping in utter defeat. Halfway to the door, Silas paused and looked back. I've spent my whole life being invisible when it mattered, he said, and impossible to ignore when it didn't. Let's go, Kincaid said, steering him toward the exit. But before they could reach the hallway, the entire station was flooded with a harsh, white light. A local news van had screeched into the parking lot, its camera already pointed directly at the front door. Damn it, Kincaid muttered, stepping forward to block the view. Someone had made a call. The reporter was already mic'd up, moving fast toward the entrance. But Silas Cromwell didn't break his stride. He walked with a quiet dignity that no camera light could diminish, his boots hitting the tile with the steady, measured rhythm of a man who had walked through hell and come out the other side. The reporter shoved a microphone forward. Sir, is it true you were wrongfully arrested here tonight? Agent Kincaid stepped in front of the camera. This is a federal matter. No comment. But Silas paused at the door of the SUV, his hand resting on the frame. He didn't turn to the camera, but his voice cut through the noise, quiet and clear. They thought I was someone I wasn't, he said, because of the truck I drive, the lines on my face, the color of my skin, but I am exactly who I say I am. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. And I have been carrying this country on my back for a lot longer than most people care to remember. He said nothing more. Kincaid shielded him from the flashing cameras as Silas climbed into the black SUV. The door shut with a solid, final sound, and the vehicle pulled away, leaving only silence and the lingering echo of his words. Inside the station, Officer Rigsby was slumped over his desk, head in his hands, a man completely broken. Officer Baxter stood frozen in front of a monitor, forced to watch his own body camera footage. He saw the smirk on his face as he mocked a war hero. He heard the arrogance in his voice as he barked orders. He watched himself cuff a man whose only crime was being underestimated. He saw every moment of his casual, thoughtless cruelty played back in high definition. It was all there. A perfect record of his failure as an officer and as a man. 2 weeks later, the consequences became official. Officer Lou Rigsby was permanently reassigned to desk duty, stripped of his patrol car and his pride. Officer Grant Baxter's badge was suspended indefinitely, his career in law enforcement effectively over. They had arrested a quiet old man in a worn-out truck, and in doing so, they had brought down a force of justice they never knew existed.